Daryl.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
All right, well, hopefully none of you know anything about the first battle of Cynthiana, so what I make up and share with you tonight, you won't be able to question or judge. And I'm going to throw some plugs in there too. I'm not selling a book. I don't have one. I've written one. My wife keeps getting on me about writing a book, but I don't know. I don't have the patience for that. And I still work full time, so there's all that goes with it. But I will put in a plug too. There's also the Cynthiana Battlefields Foundation. And since Cynthiana is, from here, less than a 60-minute drive, there's a local organization out there that's working to preserve the two different battles at Cynthiana. There was one in 1862 and one in 1864, both involving John H. Morgan. So we're going to talk about the 1st Kentucky raid in the first battle, where those firemen from Cincinnati make their appearance. So we'll talk about that. And then I'll throw in one more plug. Again, it doesn't cost anything, right? It's another plug. Augusta, Kentucky, beautiful little Augusta right there on the river. They're going to have a Civil War event September 27th, 28th, and 29th. Living history camp, Civil War music, food, just a Civil War kind of period theme kind of thing going on. I'll actually be leading a lantern tour on the Friday evening and then a regular tour on the next morning. So if you can't make Friday evening, you can come Sunday morning or Saturday morning. We'll take a tour of, that's a Basil Duke versus the local Home Guard fight that took place on September 27th of 1862. So that's another free plug. It's a free event. I mean, if you go eat, you have to pay for your food, of course, or whatever you do there. But it's a free event. So cheat a lot. I will use notes because I want to make sure when I do quotes that I do the quotes correctly. Heaven forbid if I do a quote incorrectly. I don't like doing that. I like to speak in these men's voices as much as possible. So the 1st Kentucky raid takes place in the summer of 1862. It's a precursor to the Perryville campaign. As a matter of fact, we'll talk a little bit about that, the specific date of July 16th of 1862. Well, John H. Morgan and Richard, my friend Richard, who I've known for a few years now, he knows that I love using H instead of Hunt. I love it because there's not one single official record during the Civil War where he signs anything as John Hunt Morgan. There's only one reference I've been able to find that even says John Hunt Morgan during the Civil War, and it was a song lyric. Even in Basil Duke's History of Morgan's Cavalry, he says John Hunt Morgan once, and it's at the very beginning of the book. After that, it becomes John Morgan or John H. Morgan. So the John Hunt Morgan, much like we do with a lot of Civil War names, right? We like to throw all three of them in there if we can. But it's not Civil War correct, as far as I can determine anyway. So you'll hear me say John H. a lot. I will slip and say John Hunt. So I apologize now for my slip. We know a little bit about John. This is a picture of him Mexican-American War period. He's born in Huntsville, Alabama. Huntsville, Alabama. That name is important. In 1825. And he lives in Alabama for just a few years. His father, Calvin's the son-in-law of John Wesley Hunt, who is purported to be the richest man west of the Allegheny Mountains in the 1860s, 1840s, 1830s, 18 whatever. And so John is the grandson of John Wesley Hunt, our John. But his father, Calvin, is not a very good businessman down there, trying to run some businesses for his father-in-law. And he will pack up and he will come back up and he will live with he will actually run one of his father-in-law's farms outside Lexington. So Calvin is not a very successful businessman. And to be honest with you, John's mother is probably the stronger of the two in that relationship. Because Calvin, you kind of hear a little bit about Calvin, but not a lot about Calvin. He just kind of goes to work and kind of just does his thing. You hear more about John's mother than you do John's father. John, of course, he goes to Transylvania University for about a year. And he gets in a lot of trouble in Transylvania. Tries to fight a duel. Dueling has been outlawed in the Commonwealth of Kentucky by this particular point. Doesn't seem to matter because they continue to have duels all the way into the late 1860s. But he gets kind of run out of Transylvania. It's not for him, but growing up on the farms and dealing with the businesses he sees that his grandfather is running, as well as his father, he becomes interested in business as well. But he wants to obtain a military career. He would love to get an appointment to West Point, but it doesn't happen. He tries to become an officer in the United States Marine Corps, but it doesn't happen. This is pre-war stuff. This is really small forces the United States had at that time, so there wasn't really a lot of opportunity for a civilian, even one who had some connections, to be necessarily appointed pre-war. But he will serve in the Kentucky Cavalry, and he will fight at the Battle of Buena Vista in 1847 in the War with Mexico. So he gets a little taste. When he comes back to Lexington, he will form a militia organization called the Lexington Rifles. And they will drill and they will train a little bit, but it's mostly a pre-war militia unit, which is a lot more in terms of, it's just more of a social thing. But they will practice, they will do some drill. So he still has this aspiration to be a military guy. And I think it's the fact that he doesn't officially become a military guy, like get an appointment to West Point, that allows him to some flexibility during the Civil War. I'm going to cheat a little bit now, so bear with me a little bit. When Abraham Lincoln is elected, or is starting to run for president, and we've got the elections of 1860 coming, John will write to his brother, excuse me, talking about the election of Abraham Lincoln, he writes to his brother, he says, "Our state will not, I hope, succeed, and I have no doubt that Lincoln will make a good president. At least we ought to give him a fair trial, and then if he commits some overt act, all the South will be a unit." So here in 1860, John Hunt, is talking about the election, the upcoming election, and the election of Abraham Lincoln, says we need to give Lincoln a chance here, unless he makes some sort of overt act against the Confederacy, against the South. He will lead a squadron of Kentucky cavalry well, let me back up for a second. His first wife is deathly ill. She has all kinds of medical problems, and I'm having all kinds of quit pushing the wrong button problems here. Don't ignore all these man behind the curtain things here. Whoop, whoop, it won't go back any further. Well, I think I froze it. 1 second. Technical difficulties here.
Stand in front of it.
There. Well, I just nuked it all together. So this is the part we have a little music. Da, 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 da.
We've all been there.
Yeah, slideshow.
Singing over the dancing on the phone.
That's right. I will not dance on tables, though. Sorry about that. His first wife is deathly ill. She will eventually pass away in April of 1861. And so he will not join the Confederacy right away. He will not join the Confederacy until September of 1861. For one thing, the Commonwealth is neutral, and I will use air quotes for that, because we know as well as anybody probably in this room that Kentuckians are being raised for the South and for the North. Lincoln's trying to send guns through Kentucky to arm the home guard, so it's about as neutral can't be. But he won't join until after his wife has passed away. He probably goes through a period of mourning. He, of course, has very successful businesses in the greater Lexington area, and that he will not join until Kentucky becomes a Union state, and then he will go down and he will join the Confederacy in September of 1861. He will raise a Kentucky cavalry squadron. They will fight at the Battle of Shiloh. They actually have a mounted saber charge at the Battle of Shiloh, and it's one of the last mounted saber charges that Morgan's command will ever have. And we'll touch on that here in just a little bit. Here he is, shortly after being promoted to Brigadier General. This is after our time period. Because he's still a colonel at the First Battle of Cynthiana on his first Kentucky raid. But you see how dashing he looks there, ladies? Like that? Like, looking good. Oh, I got to know, yeah, all right. And this is, again, shortly after he's promoted to Brigadier General. And he is married his second wife by this point, Mattie Reedy, who is a Southern belle from the Murfreesboro, Tennessee area. As a matter of fact, the wedding takes place in Murfreesboro. It is officiated by one Leonatus Polk. You know, super Leo Polk, right? The Bishop Polk. Bragg will attend. His best man is well, not his best man. One of his groomsmen is an Englishman, English mercenary. We'll talk about him in just a second. Breckinridge is there. So it's a pretty big to-do pre-Christmas of 1862 before Rosecrans starts to push into that area, and they result in the Battle of Stones River. Looking pretty good there. I don't have the picture with me after he gets out of the penitentiary. It's on my other slide. Not looking quite as good. It's that picture, I'm pretty sure, of what you have back there. He's aged, balding, not looking so great. More like this, unfortunately. All right, so his commanders. He's got a slew of commanders with him, but we're going to touch on some of the important ones. Anybody know who this gentleman is? Basil Duke, right? All right, so Basil Duke. Basil Duke is one of two pretty famous brothers-in-law of John H. Morgan. So he will marry Henrietta. He marries Henrietta in 1861. He comes back from Missouri. He will marry Henrietta in 1861. His other famous brother-in-law is General A.P. Hill of Antietam fame, Gettysburg fame, or infamy at Gettysburg maybe. So he's got two pretty famous brother-in-laws. Duke is an interesting character. I like Duke a lot. He's a prolific writer after the war. He's born in Scott County in 1838, so the county just north of Lexington. He starts practicing, he's accepted into the bar in 1859. He will start his law practice in St. Louis. And he is actually in Missouri when the war breaks out. And he will be under General Hardee's command while he's in Missouri. As I stated, he comes back in 1861 to Kentucky and will marry Henrietta, who's known to the family as Tommy. And then he's captured on the Great Raid of 1863, of course, post what we're going to talk about. And he's not present for Morgan at the Second Battle of Cynthiana. And if we ever want to listen to that talk, I can ramble on about that one as well. Morgan really misses him and his discipline side. This is the discipline and the brains and the tactics of the operation, or one of the two, but he's the main one. It was said if you knocked old John on the head, that Basil's brains would fall out. So this is the guy that's pretty smart. He's also smart enough to start training, and we'll talk about training here a little bit more in a minute. Morgan's cavalry is not the traditional, I draw my saber and I charge. They are trained to fight as mounted infantry, and we'll get on that here a little bit more in just a little bit. And he's one of the reasons why. He will go back and dig out some tactics from like the War of 1812 and the Mexican War. We developed as a country for mounted infantry. So like the mounted rifles that we had that was raised during the Mexican-American War, he will use some of their tactics. So that's one of our commanders. Here's another. This is one of my favorites. Somebody once said he looked like a pirate. This is Richard Montgomery Gannett, another Kentuckian, but he's wearing his Texas hat with his Texas stars on it because prior to the war he's moved to Texas. I like Gannett. He's born in Bourbon County, where Paris, Kentucky is today, at age 12. I call him the Sheldon. If any of you watches Big Bang Theory, he's like the Sheldon of Morgan's command because at age 12 he goes to Bacon College in Harrodsburg at age 12. Okay, he completes additional courses at Bethany College, which is now in West Virginia. He will graduate from the Louisville Medical College. He will practice medicine in Kentucky, then in Baton Rouge at the state penitentiary. So he'll move to Louisiana and be the physician down there at the state pen. He fathers 12 children, so he's prolific in a lot of ways. He will move to Texas in 1859. He raises a company of Texans that will be here at Cynthiana. So these Texans are at Cynthiana, okay? He will later command all the Texas cavalry out in the Trans-Mississippi, really out in the Indian Territory, and does pretty well out there, 1864, 1865. And later serves as a minister and was involved with major land deals in Texas. He's buried in Dallas, and he is the great-grandfather to Howard Hughes. Wow. Howard Hughes. Actually, he's probably grandfather. I have to go back and double-check that. But Howard Hughes, so we know who he is. At least some of us do, right? All right, and then this is the Englishman. This is the mercenary. This is George St. Ledger Grenfell. There's going to be a quiz at the end of this. Keep in mind what I'm about ready to say. He's born in 1808, so he's a little over 50 when he comes over. He's a British soldier of fortune who claimed to have fought in the following. Here's the quiz. Algeria, Morocco, under Garibaldi in South America, in the Crimean War, and in the Sepoy or Indian Mutiny of 1857. Dude gets around. Dude gets around, but he's experienced. And he's going to bring discipline and some tactics with him and bring it to Morgan's command. He's got some more interesting story. He will serve, of course, under Morgan. He'll serve under Bragg. He'll serve under Jeb Stuart eventually as well. He will resign from the Confederate Army in 1864 to join a plot to take over the governments of Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois, and to form a Northwestern Confederacy. So, guys kind of evolved. Well, we're not done with him yet. When the plan to take over Chicago, when they're going to start this plot to do the Northwestern Confederacy, when the plan fails, he's captured in Chicago. Him and another 150 others, they're arrested in what becomes known as the Chicago Conspiracy. Grenfell was tried, convicted, and sentenced to hang. He's a British citizen. Oh, we got to be careful here. Through the efforts of the British minister in Washington, they don't hang him. They send him to the Dry Tortugas. They send him to Fort Jefferson, 90 miles west of Key West. And that's where he serves out the rest of his time in the war. He's down there when Dr. Mudd comes, the guy who sets Booth's leg. He's down there when Mud comes, and evidently also helps when there's a sickness breakout that Dr. Mudd will take care of. He will help. The story doesn't quite end there. Allegedly, he escapes, grabs basically a very small rowboat, him and a couple other guys, and is presumed lost at sea, 1868. However, there's one reference I've been able to find where a letter is written from some Caribbean island, allegedly written by this guy, after 1868. And then he disappears. That's the end of his story. But boy, what an interesting cat. And we will talk more about him here in a little bit. All right, who else we got? Oh, anybody know who this is? This is Champ Ferguson. Champ Ferguson was only one of two men to be tried and executed for war crimes. The other one being Henry Wirtz of Andersonville. So this young man is on the raid, but he behaves. He doesn't do anything nefarious, at least as far as we know. As a matter of fact, Duke, being the discipline guy, will go up to Ferguson Monday. I started saying Monday. We'll go up to Ferguson and basically say, you need to be straight. There will be no wanton killing of anybody. And Champ Ferguson's alleged to have said, "Why, Colonel Duke, I've got sense. I'm sorry, it's hard for me to read in their broken vernacular. I know it ain't looked on as right to treat regular soldiers took in battle that way. Besides, I don't want to do it," talking about murdering them. "I have got no feeling against these Yankee soldiers except that they are wrong and they oughtn't come down here and fight our people. I won't tech them," and I see the word tech a lot, especially when you're reading about Alvin York. Tech him, I won't shoot him. But when I catches any of them hounds I got a good cause to kill, I'm going to kill them. Luckily on this raid, he doesn't catch any of those hounds and he's got a good cause to kill. And Champ probably should have remembered about killing soldiers because he's involved with the Saltville Massacre in 1864 with the alleged murdering of African American soldiers there.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you there.
Yeah.
You said there was only two who were executed? Is that in Kentucky?
Two in the entire war, Confederates.
What
Henry
about,
Wirtz.
what about the guy down at Flag Springs?
No. I'm sorry, for war crimes. War crimes. You're talking about Corwin or
McGraw.
McGraw. You're talking about Thomas McGraw.
Yeah, the one, but
He
tried to intercede for him.
And so did McGraw's sister. McGraw's sister allegedly goes to Lincoln and talks about it. He's not convicted for war crimes. He is allegedly arrested under Burnside's Order number 38,
Yeah,
which doesn't come out until about 5 days after he's been caught, arrested, and killed. Him and Corwin are shot up at Johnson's Island, and both of them are buried down there. One's in Flag Springs, the other one. But that's not war crimes.
Okay.
War crimes. Crimes against basically humanity in a way, right?
Okay.
Henry Wirtz, the commander of Andersonville Prison, and Champ Ferguson.
Okay.
So, great question though. And I knew about Flag Springs, thank goodness, right? Yeah, he asked me a question, I'm like, okay, there's that $20 I owe you for that seated question, I appreciate that.
But there's a marker down there at the old graveyard.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it says, ironically, we're going to digress a little bit here. Ironically, that marker says, under Burbridge's orders,
Yeah.
May 1863. Burbridge has got nothing to do with
Yeah, with
Kentucky in
Burnside.
1870.
Yeah.
He's down there with Grant and Vicksburg.
Burnside.
So somebody really doesn't like Burbridge.
Louisville.
That's right. So somebody really doesn't like Burbridge, right? I mean, that whole thing continues to permeate today.
Well, he was, the Confederate sympathizers hated him. He
Yes.
was a stern individual, for sure.
Well, even the non-Confederate sympathizers didn't
Yeah.
like him too much, right? But he's a pretty effective field commander, and if I ever do the second talk for you, we'll talk about Stephen Gano Burbridge, related to Richard Montgomery Gano. An interesting twist. Great questions. All right, boom. Training at Knoxville. So I started talking about this a little bit. July 4th is when this raid will start. After Shiloh, Morgan will move his command. It will continue to grow. It goes from that squadron size, and it will continue to grow. It gets up to about 1,000 men. So a very small brigade or a really strong regiment. So it'll continue to grow. They will move, they will be transferred, and they will now be under the command of Edmund Kirby Smith. He's under his army, and he's in Knoxville area. They will do this training in Knoxville, and this training involves different types of tactics. Again, a lot of it's developed from the mounted infantry books and tactics that were written during 1812, or used during 1812, and used during the War of Mexico in 1846 through 48. It's things like rolling vedettes. And what do I mean by that? I've got a column, right? I'm moving down the road. There was an advance guard that was trained to be way out in front, but also to put pickets on any crossroads, miles out, so they couldn't be surprised. They would use a long open line order when they dismounted to fight, and they would try to surround curve around their oppositions. A lot of these types of tactics, this is a couple examples that I have, a lot of these types of tactics are developed from mounted infantry and mounted rifles during, oh, I'm going backwards again. So that's the training that goes on in Knoxville. The raid will kick off on July 4th of 1862, the raid to go to Kentucky. I'm not going to go through all this, but what's interesting about this is who was made up of what. You've got the 2nd Kentucky Cavalry, right? These are not all Kentuckians. There's guys from Mississippi and Alabama and Tennessee and whatnot in that mix, right? So we think about some of these Kentucky regiments being Kentuckians, a lot of them aren't. Plus, Morgan is starting to get a little bit, he's put out a call, right? And some guys want to go fight with Morgan. One thing, I'm on a horse, right? I'm not on foot, so that's cool. I'd rather ride to battle or ride to whatever I'm going to do. But look at some of the weapons that they have. The short Enfield. The short Enfield is a 2-band Enfield. It's a shorter version of the long rifle, the 3-band. Company B's got shotguns. There's Mississippi rifles. There's Tower muskets in there. Company I is raised around Georgetown during the raid, and they're unarmed at Cynthiana. And then you've got Texas Cavalry, which makes up of Tennesseans and Gano's Texans. So that's under Gano's command. And there's Georgians there as well, under E.M. Nix. F.M. Nix. So this is a pretty mixed command. He also has a section of 6-pounder mountain howitzers. These are super light, super maneuverable, have about 800-yard range. And so now they've got short band Enfields. That was the preferred weapon, by the way. The short band Enfield had almost the same range as a regular infantry rifled musket. So they could fight dismounted and fight off an infantry force if needed to be. And they've got artillery to give them even more of a little punch and a little more range. So they can engage at range against infantry. If you're just carrying pistols and shotguns and even carbines, you don't have that same kind of range if you're fighting off other infantry. This will also give them an advantage over Union cavalry, because most Union cavalry are carrying carbines, pistols, right? So it gives them a little range advantage. And those 6-pounders, they're called the bullpups. Even Forrest had a couple of them he called bullpups as well. But these 2 6-pounder mountain howitzers are very light. Be stripped down, the barrel could be put on one horse, the rest of the carriage could be put on another horse. Wheeling them around in battle, one horse could drive them. So they're really maneuverable, super maneuverable. A typical Morgan Raider, a mixture of probably military and some civilian clothes. I'm pretty sure they didn't issue these checkered pants as military issue. But you also will notice he's got, let me go back here a second. This is the 2-band Enfield. It's shorter. And what I mean by band is just the number of bands that are around the barrel. That's all. The infantry version would be much longer and less easy to carry. It'd be too unwieldy to use on horseback, to carry on horseback. So now the raid begins. So on July 4th, they will leave Knoxville. I did steal this from Dr. Ramish's book. I will say that every single time. They will move to Sparta, and then they will push north into Tompkinsville, Glasgow, and Horse Cave. Well, look, I just said all that. So Horse Cave, at Horse Cave, they have an interesting, another interesting gentleman with them. Now, he's not a commander, but he's a Canadian. His name is George Ellsworth. He's a Canadian. He's a professional telegrapher, telegraph guy, right? He's got some special skills. His skills are he can tap into lines. They all can tap into lines. But he can listen to someone else's key, which is how hard or heavy they were on their machines, mimic that, and pretend like he is now at whatever station. Well, maybe I'm at Lebanon Junction, but he's not really at Lebanon Junction. But I can tap in and listen to what's going on. I can get information. I could send out false information. So Morgan's kind of like using electronic warfare in 1862. And so Ellsworth would do that. He earns his nickname Lightning. Now I think the picture is a little wrong because the description I have is supposed to be Duke, I guess Morgan, and then Ellsworth up there tapping on his knee in the rain. He did tap into a line at Horse Cave, but he was allegedly standing knee or hip deep in water, tapping on a telegraph line in a thunderstorm. Lightning Ellis. And he's really good, right? As a matter of fact, I have a great quote. I love this quote. Jeremiah Boyle was the military district commander during this raid in Kentucky. He's the Union military district commander during the raid. And Morgan will have Ellsworth send a message to Jeremiah Boyle. Good morning, Jerry. This telegraph is a great institution. You should destroy it as it keeps me too well posted. My friend Ellsworth has all your dispatches since July 10th on file. Do you want copies? I just love that. I just absolutely love that because that shows, and Richard will know, I'm not a Morgan guy. I'm just kind of a guy who will study Morgan because he's kind of close in this area. So I think he's got pluses and minuses, but he's got a bit of a playful side. And that shows right here in this dispatch that he has Ellsworth sent over to Jeremiah Boyle.
Didn't Forrest try to get him transferred to his outfit?
Yes, I think so, because he was so friggin' effective.
Well, most guys, they could maybe tap in, but he could actually mimic and understand
yes.
the other individual telegraphers.
And that would come, I mean, because, so now he would tap in, like, you know, like I said, he would tap in, he would listen, and he's like, okay, that's the Bardstown guy, I'm gonna tap in. Morgan just came through whatever with 10,000 men. And it looks like it's the Union telegraph operator sending it. So you're absolutely right, this is electronic warfare and confusion. You know, Morgan was also good about having that advanced guard I mentioned. They would send out units all around the state. This happens in the 1864 raid. They send these guys out, groups of 10, 20, 30 guys, to go wherever, to scout, to find out information, also just to wreak havoc and, again, create confusion. You know, where is Morgan? Well, we saw a force over here. Well, that's 20 miles, you know, whatever. So he was real good about allowing that to happen. And I think this is that whole part of him not being West Point trained. Because if he was West Point trained, if you go on to page 27, what am I supposed to do here? And he'd be going by the book. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. Those books are written for a reason. But in this particular case, I think it allows him to have some flexibility. What else about Ellsworth? Well, I think when they get to, let's go here a little bit. They go through Lebanon, Mackville, Harrodsburg. Harrodsburg is where Bacon College is. So Gano is back home where he was at 12 years old when he attended Bacon College. And the ladies at Harrodsburg love the fact that Morgan is there. They're trying to get pieces of his hair, clipping his horse's hair, anything they can get. And the support and the outpouring that Morgan's men get from the women at Harrodsburg, I think will allow Morgan, or mislead Morgan, to think that the Kentuckians will rise up and join the Confederacy. Because it's not the men, it's the women who are like, we're glad you're here, give me a kiss, all these things that are going on. They will push through Versailles, Midway, and in Georgetown. And while they're in Georgetown, Ellsworth will send a telegraph back down to Kirby Smith, July 16th, 1862. And he will say, the whole country can be secured. 25,000 or 30,000 men will join you at once. That will help push Edmund Kirby Smith to convince Braxton Bragg that we need to come north. We need to maybe think about coming into Kentucky. Well, unfortunately, during that campaign, the Heartland campaign or Kentucky campaign of 62, about 1/10 of those men joined the Confederate cause. And almost all of them were cavalry. Going back to the whole, I'd rather ride a horse than walk everywhere. So unfortunately, I think this outpouring that happens at Hickory, there I go again, I am so fast on that draw. I just want you to see it all over again. That's what it really is. I don't want you to forget anything, especially about that quiz later on. I think it's when they're going through, you know, Harrodsburg, they go through Versailles, or Versailles, Midway and Georgetown. They just have this outpouring by the local populace, but again, it's mostly the ladies that are doing this, right? It's not the men. And I think he becomes convinced. Now, Smith is also getting visits by Kentucky politicians and all these other folks too. This isn't just the one deciding factor, but I think this kind of pushes Smith over the edge a little bit. That'll lead to the Perryville campaign. On to Cynthiana. So they will leave and they will head to Cynthiana on July 17th of 1862. Why Cynthiana? Roads and rail. If you look at this particular map, this is a modern map, but all these roads still follow the old pikes. This was like Gettysburg, right? This is the Gettysburg of Kentucky. No, it's not, of course. But from Lexington, which is down here, you've got the Leesburg Pike that comes in. You have the Paris Pike that comes up. The Lair Road, there's a road that kicks out this way called Ruddles Mills Road that'll join the Millersburg Pike. White Oak Pike, the pike that heads up towards Grant County, which I always forget that name. The pike coming down from Falmouth. You've got the pike called the Oddville Pike or the Maysville Pike that kicks out in that direction. If he goes to Cynthiana, there's a railroad there too, by the way, Kentucky Central Railroad. He goes to Cynthiana, if there's a Union force chasing him, which there really isn't during this raid, he has all these different directions he can continue to go. I can go threaten the river. I can go to Maysville. I can work my way back out of the state if I need to. So he's got this major intersection here. Also, this is the northern cusp of the bluegrass. The bluegrass pretty much starts right down in here. North of this, if you ever drive through Harrison County, you drive down 27, beautiful drive. But this is all hilly as all get out up here. You start getting down this way and you're heading towards Paris, that's where those big farms start. Those big horse farms that start there. So I think he's had business dealings in the area prior to the war. He knows that. Also, there's a state guard encampment that takes place in 1860, just outside of Cynthiana. And who was there? John Morgan. So he's familiar with the area, and he can use the he can use the road net for escape or maneuver. And as I alluded to, the Kentucky Central Railroad runs through, familiar area we talked about, the Kentucky Central Railroad runs through Cynthiana. It started during the war. It started right across the river, well, this side of the river, right across from Cincinnati, and ended at Nicholasville. It would have been the major supply route for any Union force moving through Cumberland Gap and into East Tennessee. And what does Abraham Lincoln want to happen in East Tennessee? A Union presence, because he wants to support those East Tennesseans because they're mostly Unionists. So that railroad will become important because of that. It's not as important probably as Louisville and Nashville, but it will be a supply route. It will end, like I said, in Nicholasville, which is just about 10 miles north of Camp Dick Robinson, which is a major recruiting area for the Union early part of the war. So the Kentucky Central becomes pretty familiar. Southern sympathies. Harrison County is pretty much a pro-Southern county. Of the first 9 infantry companies that are raised during the Civil War, 7 of them will join the Confederacy. That's a pretty strong statement. We're 60 miles from Cincinnati at this point, 60 rail miles. 7 out of those first 9, so 700 out of 900 men, basically, will join the Confederacy. A lot of names in that area that are still prevalent today. Deshay, it looks like Deshay. He's descendant of a very popular politician at the time. He will become a Confederate officer. Those names are still prevalent down there today. So there's a lot of Southern sympathy in the area. Now there are Union ladies, there are Union men in the area too, don't get me wrong, but it leans definitely more towards the South, which is interesting since it's only 60 miles from Cincinnati. Economically, it's tied to the North. Most of Kentucky really is economically during the war. Use that rail, use those roads, send products up to the Ohio River, send products to Cincinnati, whatever the case may be. But from a heritage perspective, what are Kentuckians? Virginians, right? For the most part. Simplifying that, of course. But for the most part, they're Virginians. So their heart is still with the South. There's still a lot of pro-slavery people who are Unionists who don't own slaves. But there's still a Union presence as well. Supplies. 1 mile north of Cynthiana was Camp Frazier. Camp Frazier was established by the 35th Ohio Infantry Regiment, which came from my home county of Butler County, north of Cincinnati. It was established in September of 1861. It's 1 mile north of Cynthiana. They were stationed there to guard the railroad. They're one of the very first Ohio regiments to come into Kentucky after the neutrality phase was over with. And so there are still some supplies there too. So there are also supplies that Morgan can grab. The federal defense consists of Lieutenant Colonel John J. it should be Landram, and I still haven't fixed that. It's Landram, not Landrum, Landram. Lieutenant Colonel Landrum is for the 18th Kentucky Infantry Union, and he is in the area to try to form some sort of defense to blunt Morgan's advance north as the Unionists are trying to create some sort of force to chase after Morgan. They're not very successful at that. And there he is. You will notice he says ex-deputy collector of the 6th District. So we won't hold this against him. He worked for the IRS basically, right? After the war. It doesn't make it any better, right? But he's after the war. He is born in Gallatin County. He will die in 1890 in Covington. He's buried in Warsaw, Kentucky. So along the river, heading the other direction, heading down towards Louisville, thank you. Graduated from the University of Louisville Law School in 1859. He served as a sergeant in the Mexican-American War in the 1st Kentucky Cavalry. He had served in the Kentucky House of Representatives prior to the war, and after the war in the Kentucky Senate, and as a collector of the Internal Revenue Service. He will receive a gunshot wound in the ankle at Cynthiana, and was later wounded, a shell wound in the face, at the Battle of Richmond, August of 1862, Battle of Richmond, Kentucky. He will resign his, well, he will become a colonel of the 32nd Kentucky Infantry for a short period of time. His left eye had been so affected by that wound at Richmond that he will resign his commission, stating, "I will hazard the loss of my eyesight by taking the field at present." So he will go on to have a very successful political career, and died, like I said, in 1890. His forces, home guards and raw recruits. And we'll talk about through firemen here in a second. Home guard, almost his entire force is home guard, which is the Union equivalent of the State Guard. They started to form these home guard units in 1861 as a countermeasure against the State Guard. Most of the State Guard will join Confederate units. And they have the home guard, which is mostly Union force. He has companies from Newport, Cincinnati. There's a home guard company from Cincinnati, Harrison County itself, and Bratton County that will send home guards down. He will also have, raw recruits. I'll go back to those firemen here, I swear, in just a second. He will have raw recruits with him as well. He'll have 18 men from the 18th Kentucky with him, okay? He will also have 75 men of the 7th Kentucky Cavalry Union with him, 75 men, but these are all new recruits. They're also, those new recruits, the 75 Kentucky Cavalry Unionists, they are carrying a carbine. It's the Gallagher carbine, and it's called by a panel of officers later in the war as being perfectly worthless. And you will see it here, there it is. I'll go back to those firemen in a second. When it breaks open, this connection here is where it will break open to load the breech. That will snap often. It also used a paper and foil cartridge, which would jam up into the breech mechanism, making it worthless. And so those raw recruits have a carbine that doesn't function very well. Firemen from Cincinnati. I saved the best for last. How's that? Is that good? Save the best for last. So there's also a detachment of firemen from Cincinnati under the command of a Captain Glass. He's from the 4th Ward, if I remember correctly. He will bring his firemen down with a 12-pounder howitzer donated by Miles Greenwood from the Greenwood Foundry, the Eagle Foundry right across the river.
Also build fire engines.
Yes, which starts that whole first, professional fire company, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll get you in here in just a second. He will bring down an artillery crew. They will come down to Cynthiana. These are firemen. They are dressed in their fire uniforms. And they will perform, and their fire horses, their horse teams will come down with them. And they will serve this 12-pounder pretty darn well for being untrained artillerists. They do pretty darn well. Let's see, I might have a quote in here for you. It might be later, 1 second. Oh no, here we go. So Duke will write, we'll get here in a second. I'm jumping all over the place. So when Morgan gets 3 miles south of Cynthiana, they will leave Georgetown, Kentucky. They will head out the Leesburg Pike, and they will come to this intersection. This intersection is 3 miles south of Cynthiana. Cynthiana is out here in this plain. As a matter of fact, there's a water tower. You can't really see it. There's a water tower out there. That's where Cynthiana is. When he gets to this particular intersection, he will divide his force into 3. He will keep most of the 2nd Kentucky Cavalry under his immediate command with Duke. They're going to go right up the middle. He will send Gannett and those Texans and Tennesseans around to the right, and they will come in to Cynthiana from the east. And some of those Texans are allegedly carrying some big honking knives and wearing sombreros, because there's some first-person accounts that even mention that. So you can imagine that if you're some youngster and you're seeing these guys on horses with big sombreros and knives. And then he will send Nix's Georgians with 1 company of Kentucky cavalry around to the west, and they will actually swing down to the north. Camp Fraser's right here. This is 1 mile north. Camp Fraser's right here. So they will come around and they will raid into Camp Fraser. It's not really occupied. There's like a very token force there. A handful of Union guys are there. They flee. And you see, a couple hundred horsemen coming your way, you leave.
Is that where the little Edwards Cemetery is now?
Yeah, St. Edwards. Exactly right. St. Edwards is right here.
If you walk into the back, you can see the river right down
You see
below.
right there's the river?
Yeah.
Right, absolutely there. And so the camp itself was all this area right in here. The house that's there today is not a period house. It's the Burns home, but it sits in that area. And then the camp even came over to this side. It's named Camp Fraser because the farmer who had the property was Joel Fraser. Unfortunately, his house, a very historic home that used to sit in the Veterans Park, is being pretty much ripped down. the city for years, politics. You know how this goes, right? Streetcar, no streetcar. House, no house, right? They ripped it down. It's a shell of itself, which is unfortunate. It was a historic period home. It'd been nice if they could have saved it, but they didn't. So he donated the land for the camp. So they come around, they'll swing around and almost get to right where that cemetery is and then swing down right through Camp Frazier. So he divides his force. He's got 900-ish men. He'll divide it into 3 parts. The Landrum's here in the town itself, and they will defend the town itself proper. So that intersection is there. And he will do the same thing in 1864. He'll split his forces in 1864 at the same point and do the same, kind of similar same situation. Look, too far. All right, so he will take his main force right up the middle, and they will approach the bridge. The bridge, darn it, did I seriously do that? Yeah, I did. There we go. The bridge was 320 feet long. It was built in the 1830s, had a 14-foot wide roadbed. You can see it's a completely shuttered side, right? So there's no sides. Company A of the 2nd Kentucky Confederate Cavalry will try to charge mounted a couple different times across that bridge. Captain Glass says, no, you don't. Captain Glass will position his 12-pounder howitzer so to the point where those Kentuckians start to approach the bridge from the other side, he will open up right then, and they will have to fall back. As a matter of fact, Duke will write, of the Cincinnati firemen, a company of firemen from Cincinnati went to work when the fight opened as if they were putting out a fire. So he impressed them enough that even Duke wrote about that just 2 years later. The bridge was an important crossing point because the river itself was about waist deep. But okay, men could cross that, but you don't want to charge and face opposition. Landrum had put those home guard boys in all those stone and brick buildings around the other side of the river. So they're just shooting right down on Morgan's men as they're trying to approach. So Company A will try 3 different times. This is a modern view. The covered bridge would be about this way. And that's the modern John Hunt Morgan Bridge, named so by Frankfurt, not by Cynthiana. And that's the boat ramp. So this is the modern US 27. The courthouse is back over this way. So you're seeing, it's kind of a similar scene there.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Was the Keller Dam built at that time, or was it post-war?
No, Keller Dam was out there, but it's a very low level type dam. You know, like the kind you see in downtown Hamilton, just that kind of like really, just a couple feet, just to kind of.
Well, it's not much more than that now. But
No,
I just didn't know it was there then. Okay.
Yep, same. It was. Now in '62, there's no fighting out at Keller. That's part of the 1864 fight.
Yeah, that's the second battle.
Yes, sir.
Right.
All right, so what will happen, like I said, Company A, and this is backwards, I've since corrected Bill's map, but Company I was unarmed. So it's Company C that'll eventually break through. Company A will get jammed up, they can't break through, they'll try again, they can't break through. They'll redeploy, they find a ford, and the ford is basically where the modern bridge is today. They find a ford, they start to go across, and what's called the waiting charge. Company B will move up, and they'll start putting down fire with shotguns. And this will allow Company A to push across. When Company A pushes across, Company C, which really should be here, they will charge across. And they will get across into the heart of the Union defenses. And again, it's all brick and stone buildings in the downtown at this particular point. So at this point, Company C will cross over, but they have no idea where to go. They've never been to Cynthiana before. They don't know what direction am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do now? And the Red Fez will lead the way. The Red Fez is Grenfell. It's that Englishman, that mercenary. He shows up. Here he is. He might have been under orders from Border, but we're not sure. He, quote, came galloping up, having crossed the river at another point, and directed Captain Bowles of Company C on how to reach the depot street. So the railroad depot is down this direction. The charge was again ordered, and the company on all sides, surrounded by the enemy, in houses, charged on horseback a depot filled with Yankee infantry. The enfilading fire was very severe. The firing for the depot was checked somewhat by our almost reckless charge, and as it was impossible for horsemen to ride into the building, we continued our ride entirely through the town, subject all the time to a severe fire from every side of us. So Company C is milling about, and here comes Grenfell. And he's wearing a red fez, or a red cap. I think it's one of those red pillbox caps that were prevalent during the Crimean War period. I think that's what he was probably wearing. Then again, he served everywhere, so maybe he had a red fez. An actual fez with a little tassel on the back of it. It's hard saying. There's a local man who was impressed. Part of Landrum's force, there are 100 civilians that are impressed into service. And one of them is a local doctor, James Henshaw. He's serving in the Home Guards as a civilian. He will write, long quote here, but bear with me. I was armed with a shotgun, loaded with buckshot, which I intended to use only in self-defense. As I stood behind a tree box, an officer on horseback, wearing a red fez, came galloping out of a side street, waving his sword, and encouraged his men by shouting, "Give the damned Yankees hell." He made a pass at me with his saber as he rode furiously by. Then, as he was turning around the corner, I fired both barrels at him. He's already by. I'm only using the shotgun in self-defense. The fez guys moved on, and now I'm going to shoot at him. So, fires both barrels. As a reminder that he had ignored me. From his language, I judged him to be an Englishman upward of 50 years of age. I reloaded my gun, and soon afterward I saw the red fez again appearing, its wearer still shouting and waving his sword and riding like mad. While I admired his reckless daring, I despised his bombastic bravado and insolent war cry. I stood out boldly as he galloped by, but either he did not see me or perhaps again ignored me and passed on. Fired both barrels at his retreating figure. Again, self-defense. And I saw him wince at each shot. But as he made no other sign, he probably flinched at the sound of bullets as they whizzed by. So Dr. Henshaw's saying, I'm only going to use this gun in self-defense. When this Englishman rides past me, I'm going to shoot at him. Interesting enough, Henshaw and Henshaw and Grenfell will meet in Cincinnati in 1864 after Grenfell has been captured. And he will, I got to find the quote because I got these out of order. They will meet and they'll start to talk about, here it is right here. They'll start to talk about the fighting that occurred in Cynthiana. And Grenfell will exclaim to him, my word, were you there? It was the hottest scrimmage I was ever in. I was hit 4 times. I don't know if Dr. Henshaw at that particular point shared the fact that he shot at him 4 times after he'd ridden by. I'm not real clear on that. It was said that Grenfell had 11 different shots, not all in him, but some of them in his clothing, etc. 11 different rounds either hit him or went through his clothing at the first battle of Cynthiana. So that bombastic bravado guy, he did a little damage there. All right, so at this time, all this fighting is going on, but what about those Texans and Tennesseans? They have now swung way out. They bump into Wright's company of home guards out here at what's called McGee or Standpipe Hill today. It's where the high school complex is. They will retreat, those home guards will retreat back towards the depot. The depot is a 2-story brick building. It's a pretty good defensive position. They'll retreat back. And then we'll continue to push on to what is known as the Millersburg Pike. And in town, it's the Pike. It's called Pike Street. He'll come down this hillside and approach. And Captain Glass, by this point, will redeploy that 12-pounder howitzer and start shelling at Gannett. Captain Glass moves around a lot. Him and his crew are doing some good service here. In their fireman uniforms, with their fireman horses, with a 12-pound howitzer that they probably never fired before in their life. But they're here and they're putting down some fire this day. Unfortunately, in front of what's called the new Rankin House, Ganneau's men will capture that 12-pounder. And so Glass is now out of the fight. But for a while, he's moving around, he's keeping those Confederates at bay. Landrum, correct on this map, Landrum is trying to get his forces together by the depot itself. Wright's own guards are here. The 7th Kentucky guys carrying those carbines that are worthless, they're out that direction. And they'll run into Nix here in just a little bit. So Landrum's trying to get all his forces back together because you got Confederates milling about now all around town, and that railroad depot, that's a good defensive position. And then Nix will come in from the north. They will go through Camp Frazier. They'll burn a couple structures there at Camp Frazier. They will push in, though, from the north part of town, and they will run into those 7th Kentucky guys. And that fighting lasts for about all of 15 minutes. And those 7th Kentucky guys say, we're out of here. And they will retreat into town as well. And Nix now will press in. So now you've got Morgan and Duke, you've got Gannett, and now you've got Nix. It's over for the Union forces. There's 450 total Union guys here, 100 of them being civilians, most of the rest being home guard and raw recruits, right? And Morgan's got about 900. So they're outnumbered. The Union guys are now outnumbered about 2 to 1. The gun was captured, like I said, in front of what's called the new Rankin House. That house is still there. It's right along the railroad. It's been recently painted. The couple that, she's the director, president, she's the director of the Cynthiana Battlefields Foundation. Her and her husband bought what's called the new Rankin House, and they are trying to remodel and refurb. They recently painted, they've got it painted in a red brick color so it would look like it did in 1862. It was not a full structure. It was being built in 1862 and still being built in 1864 when Morgan comes back, but it's got brick walls and it's 3 stories tall. And Landrum, he will run up towards that Rankin House. He's going to try to get up on that 3rd floor to look around to see what's going on. He wants to see where are the Confederates, where are my forces. I'm trying to figure out what's going on with this fight. And somewhere in here I have a quote from him, but I must have lost it. Oh, here we go. So Landrum, he's got like his staff with him. They're running up along the railroad point, and there are 3 Confederate officers that will come up and demand his surrender. And Landrum will reply, I never surrender, and will fire 3 times at one of those officers, hitting that officer all 3 times. The officer will survive, surprisingly enough. They had to be pretty close range, because it's all pistol range. Landrum then will turn around and flee. He's got a pretty darn good horse. The Confederates will chase him and chase him and chase him. They'll chase him for 10 miles out of town. Landrum will get away. He'll get down to Paris, Kentucky. So Landrum himself will get away. Morgan's men will then capture all these Federals. They surrender. They're done. They'll capture all these Federals, and they'll place them on the 2nd floor of the courthouse. The courthouse is still there. We'll see a picture over here in just a little bit. The courthouse is still there. He will go through this whole parole process, and he will try to convince those men to join. He will even say to these men, perhaps those, I was led to believe that the men of Kentucky would join me, but I find myself severely mistaken. I will parole you and you can go home, and if you can't fight for me, I hope you won't fight against me. So the Kentuckians aren't rising up, necessarily, at least not the men. The ladies love him, but not the men. One prisoner, Union prisoner in the courthouse, will notice that the ladies of Cynthiana, the citizens of Cynthiana, are giving Morgan's men pies and cakes and milk and everything that's going on with that. And he will write, perhaps those ladies did not know that Yankee soldiers like pie and cake. So that's the surrender. All told, the fighting is an hour to an hour and a half. Home Guard didn't do too bad in an hour and a half. And I think Morgan, I won't say he gets lucky, but he splits his forces in 3. So if one of them could have been potentially defeated, this could have turned into something a little worse. But he's fighting Home Guard and raw recruits, and he's not really being chased. There's not really a Union force that's close on his heels, like later in 1863 and 1864. That's the courthouse. That's how it would have looked in 1862, red brick structure. Today it's been added onto, it's been painted white. The 2 end pieces were added in the early 1900s, but the courthouse is still there. So the Yankee prisoners would have been up here on the 2nd floor. It's a beautiful structure. Highly recommend if you ever get the chance to go down. Go when it's open, just walk around in there. It's pretty cool. The upstairs is where the courtroom is located. So.
From the outside, very similar to the Alexandria courthouse, if you ever drive down Alexandria.
It's one of the, and we can go back and talk about Burbage a little bit, but it's one of the few courthouses, at least in Kentucky, that wasn't burned down during the war as well. So which is nice. So that's, again, that's what it would look like.
The original courthouse is out back, the old log cabin.
Yes, the old log cabin, right there.
Yeah.
Henry Clay had the office and did some
Lincoln
wall.
tried a case in there.
Yeah, and was used as the radio station for a while. I know the guy owns it. I've walked in it. It looks like a modern house inside. But yeah, you're absolutely right. That's the original courthouse. That's the Civil War one. This is the one that counts. No, I'm just kidding. In 1864, there's a story about a couple men being up in the cupola as well, Union guys, but that's a whole other presentation. This is the Episcopal Church, and if I go back to the one map, because I'm actually wanting to go backwards, the Episcopal Church is up here on the north part of town, at that particular point. It was used as a hospital in 1862. It's an original structure, built in the 1850s, I believe. I should have that number, I should have it here somewhere. 1854, English Gothic style from the 14th century. Native stones, so the stone is all local. The bell came from Cincinnati in 1876. The bell was added in 1876. The pews and the altar were made in Cynthiana by local ladies. And it's a really pretty church inside. I will throw out one more pitch. If you folks ever want to do a tour of Cynthiana, I do a walking tour of this battle. It's a really easy 1.5 miles with numerous stops. You just heard it all. But we can get inside the Episcopal Church if it's off hours to give you an idea what it looks like inside. Oh, and there it is. So, sorry?
I was going to say, the information on the tours is the same, but seeing it in person is a whole different experience. Standing on a...
I owe you $20 for that pitch, don't I?
30.
20, oh God, 30? Oh my gosh. That's the inside. The altar and the pews, you can't really see the pews. They were all carved by Cynthiana ladies.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
The, up on, down there in Cynthiana, I think they call it Kimbrough Hill. Everybody that drives down 27 sees the old graveyard there.
Yes.
Actually, the Civil War graveyard is up off of
Yes, sir.
Millersburg Pike there.
That's post-war.
Yeah, well, I was wondering, is that from the first battle or the second battle, most of those graves?
They're a mixture of both.
Okay.
Those men were initially buried in the old cemetery first, And then they were moved to Battle Grove, and Battle Grove was established in 1867 or
Oh,
1868.
okay, okay. Well, now, was that established by the Confederates?
No.
Like the Daughters of the Confederacy? or-
Well, the monument was.
Mhm.
The monument is one of the very first Confederate, actually it's one of the very first Confederate monuments in the entire United States.
Like 130 feet, isn't it?
No, the monument's short. It's 20 feet tall,
Oh.
More than that, I think, but I-
25, but it's
Yeah.
not, no, it's not huge. I don't have a picture of it. 'cause it's-
Maybe the one I'm thinking of is the Mexican War one that's up there too.
It's smaller. The Mexican War one is about 12 feet tall,
Okay.
so. I mean, I can fire up my other PowerPoint, we can look
No, I
at it.
thought I just remembered a taller one down there from.
Perryville's got a very large one.
Yeah, but it's not 130 feet either. It's
I don't.
40 feet or something like that.
Yeah.
It's not very tall. The group there, again, Cynthiana Battlefields Foundation, they're marking some of these sites. So you'll see the hospital flag. This is right in front of the Episcopal Church door. Right there's the Episcopal Church behind that. So they're down there marking sites, and this is part of their driving tour as well. So I'm gonna say, bear with me now, Richard. You can go down there and tour on your own, but you gotta know where to go, to be honest. Now, the city of Cynthiana has an app now which has the tour on it. So if you go to Cynthiana site, download the app, you can do that tour. But the tour is 14 stops, and it's a mixture of everything. First battle, second battle, Camp Fraser, Old Pioneer Cemetery, blah, blah, blah. It's a mixture of everything. It's not in order. It's, the information's great, but it's not in order, so it makes it kind of confusing.
And they're supposedly redoing the tour now. They've tried that in the past, but
Yeah.
another effort to put the
To
tour.
make things a little bit better. Aftermath. I talk about some of the severe fighting. I had another quote. John Lewis, he was recruited in Georgetown into that Company I of the 2nd Kentucky Confederate. Which was unarmed, by the way, unarmed. He would write, "The ordeal was a severe one for me, an inexperienced county youth who had never engaged in any conflict severer than the game of shinny," which is basically pickup field hockey, or had any experience with firearms save a fowling piece in pursuit of the squirrel and rabbit. It was a valuable lesson and served me on many other occasions amid scenes and dangers most trying. I here saw my first dead soldier, and not till then did I fully realize what war meant. We're going to talk about too. I mentioned about the severe fighting, always under severe fire, et cetera, casualties are very minor for all that talk about severe fighting. The Federals had anywhere from 17 to 20 killed, 34 to 46 wounded, and 420 captured because the rest of them all surrendered. Confederates anywhere from 8 to 19 killed and 29 wounded in action. So very small in terms of overall casualties. But you hear about some of these guys describing how intense the fighting was. Well, this is a lot of these guys. It's really many of their first fight. Again, a small portion of Morgan's command had fought at Shiloh, but realistically, this is their first fight. So you read any first-person account about like their first action, it's always intense and severe. And then you go back and look at the casualty reports, and heaven forbid anybody gets killed or wounded. But you go back and look at the casualty reports, and you go, well, that was hardly anything compared to later battles, right? That's always that first fight that they always seem to remember. They remembered Cynthiana. While most of Morgan's men would take military supplies, because they took military supplies. They took some different things there in town. They did burn, like I said, some structures up at Camp Fraser, but Camp Fraser is a military target, so that's legit. When they leave, some of the Texans will go up towards the Oddville Pike, and they'll go to the little village of Oddville. They will go to a store there, and the Texans will rob the store. Texans, go figure, right? They will take strips of red flannel, calico, and baby shoes. Why?
Baby shoes.
Why? Why baby shoes?
Put
Why?
it on the horses?
That's an interesting concept. And why the red flannel maybe, and calico. Why calico and shoes? The blockade is starting to kick in.
Trade, yeah.
Sure, yeah, they don't have things back home. So they're taking these things back home. Calico I can give to my wife, she can make her own dress, right? We know how that works, right? You can make your own dress. Here, honey, look what I brought for you, a bowl of calico. And the baby shoes if they had young ones at home, or maybe going to have young ones at home. The blockade, the Union naval blockade is starting to kick in a little bit. And so they're taking some non-military essentials. A Cincinnati newspaperman would claim that every Confederate went away with a new pair of pants and a load of clothing piled up before him on his horse. So most of the targets, most of what they took was fairly legit. There was no wanton destruction and those kinds of things on this particular raid, which is kind of nice. Some destruction and some plunder. And, I threw this picture in here. The bridge is back here. The modern bridge, the cover bridge would be behind at a different angle. the end building, the one there on the furthest left, was purported to be Morgan's headquarters. He will stay the night, him and his command will stay the night of July 17th. So they're still in the area, and that's the old Rankin House. So Rankin is building this other hotel over by the Kentucky Central, but this is the old house. And it's during 1864 that Rankin will beg Morgan not to burn down the new house, again, another talk. And he'll say, come to the old house, a bar, come have a drink. And Morgan and his command just drunk him dry at the old house, allegedly. He would use that building again in 1864 as his headquarters as well. And it's alleged. I say alleged because historian Bill Penn, who literally wrote the book, he's pretty convinced that that's legit too, but you can't really put one definitive source that says that was it, for sure. After July 17th, on July 18th, Morgan will move his men down to Paris, Kentucky, and then they will work their way out of the state. They will swing out, go to Paris, Winchester, Richmond, Crab Orchard, Somerset, Monticello, and then back to Sparta. There will be one attempt by the Union forces. It's General G. Clay Smith. I always have to think about that. General G. Clay Smith is a Union commander. He's putting together a couple thousand men. They're finally starting to get on Morgan's heels a little bit. They will march up to Paris on July 18th as Morgan's men are basically leaving. And they won't engage. Morgan's probably out there going, see ya, I got some dispatches for you, that kind of thing. And that's it. The pursuit is pretty much over with. Morgan then gets to leave the state pretty much of his own volition, and the Union advance or follow-up is very weak and very poor. So this very first Kentucky raid, is pretty darn successful for John H. Morgan. I almost said Hunt there, by the way. It's pretty successful for John H. Morgan. He doesn't do anything goofy, gets some intelligence. However, that telegraph that gets sent on July 16th that leads to the Perryville campaign, that might have been a bad trigger for Gerby Smith. But they go through, there's no wanton destruction, there's no murders going along, so it's a pretty good raid. In 1863, it'll be a little less than ideal. There will be a couple murders that happen along the way. One in Indiana, at least one I know of in Indiana, a couple of them in Ohio, of civilians that'll happen along the way. And in 1864, again, whole different talk. In 1864, that's a whole different group that he's got with him in 64, and there's a lot of destruction and lack of discipline in his command in 1864. As I stated, that's pretty much the end of my presentation. It went a little longer because I'd like to flat track sometimes. Yes?
The fire department
Yes.
that went there,
Yeah.
why did they come up from Cincinnati? What was their reason for coming? What was that all about that they came to the battle from?
I'm not following your question.
Okay, the firemen, like
Oh, yeah,
their
okay.
grandfather, they had a really important job there, what they were doing. But they went there, I guess, volunteer on there. What was the reason? What was going on?
Well, kind of volunteer. Lew Wallace was the commander of the forces in Cincinnati. He knew that Cincinnati would be a great plum if the Confederates could either interrupt the manufacturing process or even capture the city. So he didn't have enough regular troops. In fact, my other great-grandfather was in a infantry unit that was on their way to Tennessee on the trains, and he was dispatched to Fort Mitchell to help guard those guns, wound up in Perryville and so on. They were really strapped for personnel. So he activated or made militia, police, and firemen. And every unit had to put so many people into there. Captain Glass and Captain Charles Thorsen their horses and a 12-pounder went to Cynthiana. The general knew that his battles had to take place as far away from Cincinnati as possible, where you could still, supply the people. So they had railroad crossings, road nets, and so on that they had to protect, and that took a lot of men. That's 50 miles from Cincinnati about. They was going all the way around Cincinnati at that distance. That's a lot of people. So, and they had a lot of volunteer civilians. The blacks in Cincinnati did most of their earthworks in the forest around Cincinnati where we live in Fort Mitchell and Fort Thomas. Am I on right now?
So they pretty much knew, actually they had to do that in order to protect Cincinnati.
Oh yeah, this was all to protect Cincinnati.
They would have gotten into Cincinnati.
The small battles that we had in this state were as important as Gettysburg as others. They just didn't take, a lot of the battles didn't occur because of this sort of thing. And it kept this and Battle of Wildcat Mountain, finally, the Confederates knew that they could not take Cincinnati, they could not get Kentucky to go into the Confederacy. These are very small battles, but the Confederate generals saw they were beating a dead horse there, so to speak.
I hate to correct the sheriff. It wasn't Lew Wallace at this time. Lew Wallace does not get to command until late August, so this is July. It's Horatio Wright.
Oh, okay.
Is the military.
I stand corrected.
But everything else,
I stand
he's
corrected.
absolutely, like, Wallace does come to Cincinnati,
Yeah.
organizes all these defenses, gets all these men together, gets the Black Brigade
Exactly.
together. Absolutely right, but it's Horatio Wright is the military commander.
Yeah, I
at that
appreciate
point. But beyond that, he's 100% spot
But
on.
the fire.
Well, I know the mayor. I know the mayor. That might help. I don't know, then again, it might not.
Because he doesn't know the nightmare.
I don't know the nightmare.
I
I
have
know.
something for you.
Oh.
You may already have.
I do not.
But this is for you.
Oh, fantastic.
Come
Oh,
on,
and it's
dog.
Jay's book. Excellent. I do not have that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Appreciate
over.
that. I really do.
And we will.